this up. Welcome to our Backyard Brothers podcast. We're excited to be here today and talk about a lot of different sports that are going on. And so we're gonna jump right in. And Cody's leading us off with a memory. Cody, take us away.
All right. Well, with college football season officially over, bowling season coming up in about a week, really, about a week's from now, I decided to kind of go back to a memory um, that's special to me. Being a Utah fan, I want to talk about the 2008 season. 2009 is the year that Utah upset Alabama in the All-State Sugar Bowl that year. A little bit of a background. So this is Kyle Whittingham's fourth year coaching there. This is Nick Saban's second year coaching at Alabama. And Alabama went completely undefeated up until the SEC championship game. So they were 12-0. And then they went to play against Florida, which I think at the time was still being coached by Urban Meyer. And they got spanked by Florida in the SEC championship game. So they were 12-1, and Utah was undefeated. And so Utah was kind of awarded this chance, kind of like the same kind of liberties being awarded the chance to play against Oregon kind of idea. I mean there's stars all over this Alabama team. Namely there's Mark Ingram on this team. There's Julio Jones. There's let's see, there's a few other people as well. There's I remember now. One second.
Reem Jackson,
Yeah,
Javier
Dante Hightower.
Arenas, Dante Hightower, Rolando
Hightower.
McClain. Yeah.
So Kareem Jackson, that was the other one I was thinking of. So there's littered with talent that people still recognize to this day. And then on Utah's side, first to say that the now well known Brian Johnson was at quarterback, and was fantastic for them that year. But I mean, back then, I mean, even still to this day, group of five teams. There's a lot of times people don't know a lot of the players on those teams unless they're just an absolute stud, a star, and so that was kind of similar, I think, for Utah, except for maybe the linebacker Sylvester. I don't even remember his first name.
Stevenson.
Thank you. And so Utah, good looking team, obviously being very well coached, and then Alabama being Alabama who they are, star-studded talent. And they go into it, and Utah goes up 21-0 in the first quarter. And I remember, first off, when this game was actually played, I would have been 12, 13 or 14. And so I wouldn't have actually watched the game at that point. I think I was too interested in playing Madden or something at that point. But obviously I've watched it many times since. Because that's one thing that fans of Utah will hang their hat on stuff. Oh yeah, well we're 1-0 against Alabama or against Nick Saban, things like that. So it's kind of fun to watch that. So and Utah really just kind of hang in there. Alabama came back. It kind of became a game, and then Utah pulled away in the fourth quarter, and beat Nick Saban's Alabama team pretty soundly, 31-17, convincingly, and that ended up being the only undefeated team that year. Utah was the only undefeated team, which through the BCS ranking system, Anderson and Hester, they were, and I know you're probably going to laugh at me, but they were awarded the quote unquote national champions of that year. And so through the BCS, Anderson and Hester ranking. So, I think we can join UCF and that kind of idea. But but that's kind of my memory. I wanted to talk about that. And many people could have their own, memory of their team having something awesome.
Yeah, I can go. So I was 17. I remember watching the game, being very excited, going into the game, being a Utah fan at the time, and yeah, very excited. But also, I went in with the understanding that Utah didn't stand a chance. That not only was Alabama full, had a dozen future NFL stars, but the offensive line has 100 pounds on the defensive line across the board, and this is just a different breed of human. That how do you have a 20-year-old who's already 6'7", 340 pounds? That doesn't make any sense, but somehow they had them, right? and yeah, very outmatched. But then Utah, Cody, as you said, came in and just absolutely hit him in the mouth. Scored 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, and then was able to keep the pressure on in order to win the game. And it was just an incredible, surprising display that, along with many of the other games that happened in that decade, has helped to form what is happening next year with the 12-game playoff that is allowing more teams to be there. I think you can absolutely trace that directly back to the 2000s BCS Busters game, Utah beating Alabama being one of the big ones.
Yeah, that one and Boise State over Oklahoma. Yeah.
Those two.
Right. I was actually on my mission at this point. And so I did not see this game live. At the time, as a missionary, you couldn't have a phone that had access to internet, so you couldn't go and see what, or a laptop for that matter. I think it's all different now, but anyway, I didn't have that. What I did have was a phone, and there was a number that I would call every week. It was like 855 tell me, I think, something like that, and you would go and it would tell you all the scores. Yeah. And so I would do that every week, like for NFL games and things like that. And this was one of the ones that I was looking at, and when the score came out, I was like, I actually redialed to hear it again because I didn't believe that was the case, that Utah actually beat Alabama. I have since, like Cody, I've watched it. I don't think I've watched it 13 times, Cody, but I've watched it once. I've watched the full game once since, and watching it after the fact is a little bit different because you know what's going to happen, but still, like you said, Utah goes up really quickly, 21-0, and then I'm imagining watching it for the first time, even though I know what happens. And you can think by the third quarter there, when Alabama comes back 21-17, you've got to think, oh, it's over. Sorry, Utah, you had a good run, but Alabama's going to come back and win this game. And they didn't. Utah scored the last two. They scored a touchdown and a field goal in the fourth quarter to really put the game away, and it was quite an accomplishment from Utah to set themselves apart as the only undefeated team in the country at that point, and to beat Alabama. And watching what Nick Saban had to say afterwards was a little insulting, I guess, to Utah, because I mean, and he's right for some of the part. He was talking about how badly Alabama played in that game, and they didn't play very well. They had some turnovers. They let Utah run all over them, which was supposed to be Alabama's strength, and all those things. So that part is true, but you got to give credit to where credit's due, and Nick Saban didn't do that. And I remember that being a big thing that I took away from it. Yeah, but that's a good memory, and that leads directly into the first thing we're going to talk about. This is the last year of the 4-team playoff, and it's quite a doozy for the committee to have to deal with, because 3 of the undefeated teams stayed undefeated, right? Michigan, Washington, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State stayed undefeated. Alabama comes in and beats Georgia, and that was what we kind of talked about as being a possibility there. So puts the committee in a bind, because no playoff has ever not had an SEC team, and the SEC champion should be in there, is what a lot of people think. And sure enough, Alabama gets number 4 and kicks out the undefeated Florida State. And the committee's ruling was based on the bylaws of the playoff committee. If a team that is going into the playoff is undefeated, but they do not have a key player, they can do what they just did. They can substitute based on this is not the same team that it was 2 months ago. Is that fair? That's what we want to talk about. Florida State being excluded from the playoff. What are our reactions here? Dustin.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry.
I was just going to call on somebody. Yeah.
Okay.
Man, so yeah, I'm upset on behalf of Florida State that it's supposed to be the team that's most deserving gets there, and it wasn't. That they look at, that Florida State quarterback, remind me his name, Travis.
Jordan
Travis.
Travis. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's injured, right? He's not going to be able to play, and the committee says, "Oh no, he's not going to be able to play. This is not the same team. Let's not put them in that position where they could get beat really bad." There's absolutely no other sport where that happens in any instance whatsoever. It's unbecoming of sports in general. I mean, can you imagine? A Super Bowl's passed. I remember a few years ago, Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes is dealing with a terrible ankle injury. Would they come in and say, "Hey, just to make this a more fair game, we're going to delay the Super Bowl a couple of weeks"? It's that's not sports. That's not competition. It's supposed to be, hey, tough luck, next man up. This is a team. This is not an individual thing. Even in individual sports, golf, tennis, things like that, they say, "Hey, you're not healthy enough to play. Sorry, that's too bad. You'll have to get the next one." There's never there's never a, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll change that for you. That's not fair for you." And so I'm sad that they said, "Oh, because you don't have your player, we won't put you in that stage. We'll put you somewhere else," And so I'm upset on their behalf. I don't think that it's becoming of competitive sports. And I'm, again, just sad and angry on their behalf.
I agree 100% with you, Dustin. It's I'm Mike Norvell used the word disgusted and infuriated. I'm not sure if I can say that's how I feel, but if I were a Florida State fan, I would feel that way. It's just, I mean, how can you not let a Power Five undefeated champion in, especially when they were still able to win without their star quarterback? To me, that's amazing right there. Like you said, this is not a one player kind of sport. This is a team sport. This is a sport that is, you figure out how to overcome adversity kind of sport. You got to learn how, the next man up mentality. And if you're not going to reward that, just like Mike Norvell said, what's the point of playing the games? You play these games to figure out, who's deserving of that, who gets that chance to prove to see if they can do it. I really love the idea that TCU got in last year. Yeah, they got spanked, but hey, they deserve to be there, okay? And that's the way I see it, is that they deserved a chance to play. And Florida State deserved a chance to show what their adversity, how they can overcome that, could be like playing in the national championship without their star quarterback. And to me, it just further cements the fact that something needs to change, in my opinion, other than the playoff being expanded. Something needs to change with the committee. I don't know. In my opinion, it's, something needs to be changed. Whether it's still keeping the committee, but then you bring in the AP poll and the BCS rankings and combine all three of those to find out, what can even out. Maybe, I don't know, but it's annoying, and at least for me, it gives me the picture that either the SEC bribed them, or it's just the SEC. We have to have the SEC inside. We can't not, and that's just disgusting. There has to be parity in this sport, or else it's going to ruin it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Dustin's making the money sign, and that's what it
It's
is.
all about
The
money.
SEC is going to make a lot more money. Also, you wonder, FSU, Florida State played such good defense against Louisville. That's how they won the game. Obviously, their offense didn't do squat, but their defense won the game. And you wonder if the committee doesn't want to see a 10-7 playoff game, because Florida State would be that good on defense. Maybe, against one of the other three teams, maybe it wouldn't go that way. The other three teams are really good offensively, and maybe it would end up being a 35-3 final score that no one wants to see. But Florida State deserves a chance to be there, to win that game with the third string quarterback or whatever it is there. And I heard a really funny. So I listened to the Pro Football Focus podcast, and they mentioned this committee's rankings real quick, and they said, so Kenny Pickett is out, right? So no one wants to see the Steelers go to the playoffs with Mitchell Trubisky. Let's just put the Texans there, right? So
Yeah.
Even if the Steelers end up winning the next few games, no one wants to see the Steelers in the playoffs because they're horrible. And who cares how they're winning the games, right? We don't want to see them. So let's put the Texans in there. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what we've done there. So, and
Yeah.
it's all bad. It's going to be fixed a little bit next year, but still not to the degree. So all pro sports, NBA, NFL, they have a mathematical system to determine the seeds. College sports don't have that, both in football and basketball. It's all the eye test. It's all ranking them based on a committee or a couple, 4 heads in a room that decide that UConn is number 7 in basketball, and these are the other ones. And you look, so why does Florida State end up being number 5? If you're going to do it that way, I mean, if you're going to say that Florida State doesn't deserve to play in number 4, why do you put them at 5? Put them at like 13 and put the other teams that are there in front of them. Apparently, you have the top 4 they really care about, and then they, whoever has the pencil just puts in the name for the other 20. So, like that's what it seems like, and so.
Yeah. Why do the numbers matter after 4? Because Liberty's number 23? And they're in, right? What, the number doesn't matter at that point.
And they're undefeated too. Yeah.
And then I absolutely agree with a lot of what you said, especially the idea that you need to remove opinion. You need to remove opinion. Every single sport has you win the conference, you're in. You win a certain number of games, you're in. And instead in college football somehow it comes up to opinion.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say is going back to the eye test and the committee and then the whole, like, we don't want to see what could potentially be a 34-3 game. That should not be up to them to decide.
No.
The record is what's there to decide. That's why they played the games. And so you put it in, and to be honest, a Florida State defense against a Washington offense might have been really fun to watch. That at least that part. And so I think that's what they need to realize. They're not there to decide who gets in. I think they're just there to analyze the records, kind of idea. And that's what really, really bothered me, is it should not be up to just these 13 people to decide.
Yeah. And I wonder how much the committee was tempted to put both Georgia and Alabama in the top 4. Because you think about that, I don't know who you knock out, maybe Texas in that case, but how do you put Alabama in front of Texas after Texas is the only one that beat Alabama? So I'm sure that came into their decision, but I bet there was a lot of temptation to put Georgia in the playoff. But
yeah. I always think it's interesting when teams that have played each other during the season are then have the potential to play each other again. It's kind of like we already seen this, so Alabama and Texas playing again. It's like, okay, I understand. Hey, grudge match, but we've already seen this. We've already seen an outcome here that with a league that has, 100 different teams. Can we get something a little different, a little diversity?
Yep. Okay. One more quick thing about college football. We've seen a lot of players, especially high quality impact quarterbacks for a lot of teams, decide not to play in their bowl game that are not in the playoff. Caleb Williams hasn't even declared for the draft yet. He just said he's not playing for USC in the bowl game. Who knows if he'll come back next year, but he doesn't want to play if they're not in the playoff, essentially. Or maybe he's preparing for the draft. I don't know. Same thing for Oregon State's, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
DJ Uiagalelei.
He's transferring. Who knows who he's going to play for next year? This is his 3rd transfer, but he's playing somewhere else. Kyle McCord for Ohio State's in the transfer portal. Well, he's not going to play for the Ohio State bowl game. So what is this doing for these other bowl games, both ratings wise as well as these schools that you're paying for these schools to come play in your big bowl game, and if you're not in the playoff, the star players are saying, I don't want to play in that. Like, what is that saying? Cody.
It's just, I mean, the bowl games is part of what makes college football so exciting. It really is. It's exciting to kind of get non-conference games kind of matched up again at the end, going with records, and it's sad to see these players say like, you know, I'm too good for this. I don't want to do this, or hey, if I'm not going to be playing for a national championship, I don't care. Um, and I think it was even a year or two ago. I think it was Jackson Smith and Jigba. Even I think he sat out a playoff game. He opted out of the playoff game, and I'm thinking, okay, if players are going to opt out of that too, like, what's the point of it? Going forward? I mean, um, people say you want to get the best matchups and get all this money, but if players are going to be opting out, what's going on there? And so I think it is really destroying that part of the traditional aspect of college football, the bowl games. And that's part of the thing I think is going to take another hit with a 12 team. The once that's 12 team format, bowl games are going to become even more like I don't want to play in the Myrtle Beach Bowl, kind of idea, things like that. And so it's um I don't know what they can do. I mean, other than maybe even look at the idea of contracts with players. And they're already doing NIL. Maybe a contract at this point for number one. Maybe do a contract to kind of keep them from the portal as much. And number two, contract says, hey, you play in a bowl game for us. That might be an option. Because, I mean, if they're already doing NIL and transfer portal is basically free agency, you might as well start doing contracts.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I like it too. I expect that, what'll happen in the future, Cody, may be similar to what you suggested, is that these schools, but then also, like Scott said, there's companies that are putting down millions of dollars sponsoring this, and there's usually events going on in the city where the bowl's held for days in advance to celebrate these schools and these players and their accomplishment. And then, the players are not at all grateful for that and choose not to participate, right? Which these are 20-year-old kids. They're that have been told they're special their whole life. We've talked about that before. And so they don't get it. And so I expect that these companies, these sponsors, and these schools will probably have some legal writing in place that says, hey, if you want, 50, we're going to take away 50% of your NIL if you don't participate in the bowl game of your own free will. What I expect players to happen with players is, so if players come in and say, man, I'm mad that I'm not playing in the playoffs, so I'm not even going to play in this bowl game. As a NFL owner, you say, wait a minute, you didn't have a good season and you're quitting. I don't want to draft you. And so I would not be surprised if Caleb Williams' stock drops, that he drops in the draft, because it's like, wait a minute, what's more important to you? Winning a football game or getting your bag of money? What's more important? And that's what you gotta have to understand as a player at this caliber, is that the money comes with the job, but the job is to win games. And you have to play, and a bowl game is so much better for your marketability than the NFL Combine ever will be. To win a bowl game, to show out in a bowl game, that's what gets you a good draft stock.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add. I would love to be able to say, something on the other side and try to put some controversy and debate and argument into what we're doing. But I agree with both of you. And so, like, you think of the devil's advocate here, and you say, I think what's his name? There's a wide receiver that was drafted this year, and I can't remember his name. I'd have to go back and look at it. But this was a first round talent that was injured in the bowl game, and he dropped to the 5th round because of it. And so there is that reasoning. So that's the only devil's advocate I can see, that trying to preserve your status as a draft pick and not getting injured so you can't play the next year, and they draft you in the 6th round instead as a developmental prospect. And the difference between a 1st round and a 6th round in money is millions of dollars. And so I can see that. That's the only thing I can think of that is for that issue. But I don't like it still.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the
I
only,
would just argue with that is like, hey, if you don't get injured in the bowl game, you may get injured in training camp. You may get injured in your first NFL game, and sure, you may still have that wet ink on paper, but it's the same difference that you're not playing, you're not be able to show what you can, and injuries are a part of sports, especially football in general, and no football players should go out there afraid of being injured because that's what they've signed up for their whole lives, within the realm of safety that they're trying to create.
yeah, just to add to that, I just think like, I mean, with the whole idea of injuries being part of the game, you could get injured the second to last game of the season. You could get injured your last game of the season, and it's going to basically have the same impact because the bowl game is only going to be 2 weeks later, maybe 3 weeks later.
Yep.
And so if you're playing in the last game of the season and you get injured, there shouldn't be a difference there. And I totally get the money idea, but that still rubs me the wrong way. I understand that people want the money. That's your career. Um, but I mean, let's be honest, millions of dollars is still going to be okay. You're still going to be okay there. And my only other thought to what you were saying, Dustin, about like NFL executives or owners wanting to, like looking at Caleb Williams, his draft stock plummeting. My only concern there is that this is so normal now. People, all the quarterbacks and people are just, no, I'm not gonna play in the bowl game because I want to be my first overall pick. And owners are saying that like, oh yeah, well he can do that because he's Caleb Williams, and or he can do that because X, Y, and Z, and eh, these 30 people have done that before him, and it's almost becoming normalized, and so I wonder if that's even gonna be an issue to these owners anymore. It should be. I just don't know if it will be.
Yeah. Last thought on this topic. It always goes back and forth in the top two picks, whether it's going to be Caleb Williams or Drake May from North Carolina. If Drake May plays his bowl game, you think that puts Drake May at number one and Caleb Williams at two? I don't know.
Especially if he has a good game. Yes.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. We had a packed agenda where we're going to talk about NBA and college basketball. I worry we're not going to get to that, but we may do it next week because we need to talk about some NFL, a couple of different topics in the NFL. First of all, how do I introduce this topic? So I I had the most fun watching an NFL game on Sunday. The 49ers beat the brotherly loving stuffing out of the Eagles. And it was fun to watch. And Cody, if I can name drop for you, Fred Warner beat the ever loving stuffing out of Brian Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. That offense, they played a good first quarter, and then 49ers woke up and they scored every single possession after the first quarter. All six straight touchdowns. And this was, I mean, it was crazy because, the 49ers are talking tons of trash leading up to this game. They were trash talking everywhere. Deebo Samuel in particular calling pretty much every player on the Eagles trash, 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 trash. And then it's one thing if you don't do it, but then he goes out and he dominates and scores 3 touchdowns. And it's like inviting these strangers to your home. They piss on your floor and leave. And so, like, what is the impact of that game as far as the power rankings? Because I think it's pretty inarguable at this point that the 49ers are the best team in the NFL. After dominating in that way, and they have 2 of the most dominating wins of the season. They annihilated the Cowboys and they annihilated the Eagles. What more can we talk about for who's the best team in the NFL? Is it the 49ers? And if not, who is?
So on my response first is that after that loss, the Eagles dropped from number 1 in the NFC to number 1 in the NFC. That absolutely nothing changed for the Eagles. They are still the best team in the NFC because in NFL it goes by rankings, not by opinion. So that's my little bite back there. But what I would say is that these 2 teams are probably on a collision course deep in the playoffs, right? two teams that are going to collide in the playoffs, and it's going to be a fun game. And I would probably be on the side of I would expect the 49ers to win that game. Just based on how they played, if they can approach that game healthy, right? We saw what happened last year when they didn't have health. So I hope that they collide in the playoffs again.
Yeah.
For me to say or try to admit that the 49ers are the best team in the league tastes like arsenic in my mouth, so I'm not sure if I can say that. But I have to state truth where it is. They annihilated the Eagles, who, I mean, I think to everyone, it's not even a doubt, to everyone, they were the best team in this league. Um, my boss is a big Eagles fan, and I went up to him and I was like, "What the heck happened?" And his reasoning didn't make much sense to me. He was like, "Oh, we must have been tired, or our players were out." I'm like, you can't use tired as an excuse. I mean, maybe players are being out. I think Fletcher Cox and a few other people didn't get a play, but then again, it goes back to next man mentality. That shouldn't be an excuse, right? Not an individual player game. So, um, I think that part of it is an overreaction for a lot of people that, hey, they're let's not say that they're the best team in the NFL yet, because teams have bad days. The Eagles could have done that. And so, like we're saying, we expect the Eagles to meet the Niners again in the playoffs. And I expect to see the real game then. And I would expect it to be a lot closer. So I think it's an overreaction, but at the same time, I think everyone needs to take take a little time and realize the 49ers are better than we thought.
And let me respond to a couple of things there, because the Eagles didn't really play a bad game. And that's something to look at. There were no turnovers. The Eagles didn't turn the ball over. The Eagles didn't make really poor mistakes on offense necessarily. They just got dominated. And that's something to and to they play the Cowboys in Dallas, who haven't lost a home game since early last season. So that's an important game for the Eagles. If the Eagles lose that game and the 49ers beat the Seahawks in San Francisco, 49ers are suddenly number one in the NFL, or in the NFC as well. And so, important game for a bunch of teams next week. But those are two games to keep your eye on if you care about those teams. And I know all of us in some way or another do, for Eagles, 49ers, Seahawks, Cowboys. So, yeah. So let's talk about MVP candidates. So I was wondering and thinking about some of the MVP candidates. Is the MVP just simply a quarterback award now? Is that all it's going to be? And who non-quarterback can win the award? Let me start by saying, Joe Burrow was a big candidate, and then he got hurt. He's out. Josh Allen is a turnover machine. He's not going to win it. And so maybe the two top guys are out. Patrick Mahomes is having the worst statistical season of his career, and most of it is because he has the worst set of receivers in the NFL. So it's not his fault, but he's not going to win the MVP, but it's not necessarily his fault. So those three quarterbacks are out. So who can a non-quarterback step up and win that award, and who is it?
So we know that Tyreek Hill is having a fantastic season, that he's on pace to potentially surpass 2,000 yards, which would be incredible. I'm not sure it's enough to win an MVP, because I think the MVP is a quarterback award. Well, the last time that a non-quarterback won it was 15 years ago?
2007, Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, so it's just not going to go to a non-quarterback. I would expect it to go to either Jalen Hurts or Brock Purdy. So, which would be interesting, because Brock Purdy he's great, but the offense is also very West Coast offense, and so it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see how that goes.
Let me jump ahead of you, Cody, for a second, because the only other non-quarterback that could win is Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers. But again, like you, Dustin, I don't think a non-quarterback is going to win. But I want to throw another name in. Dak Prescott is one of the front runners for the MVP. The only problem is he he only has one win over a team with a winning record that came last week against the Seahawks. But they have quite a gauntlet to run through. They have to play Philadelphia, they have to play Detroit, they have to play Miami, and they have to play Buffalo. Those are 4 of their last 5 games. If Dallas wins all 4 of those games with Dak Prescott, Dak Prescott is winning MVP.
So,
agree.
I mean, I think that obviously the MVP, kind of quickly going over to college again, Heisman is basically MVP, right? And Heisman is also an almost quarterback reward as well. MVP is basically, I wish they would just make the best quarterback award. Have that in there and do that. And MVP can be anyone else. So no, I don't think a non-quarterback will win it. Christian McCaffrey could, Tyreek Hill could, but I don't think it will happen. One other name I want to put out there, though, someone just a little bit think about. If he continues this way, is it possible for rookie quarterback CJ Stroud to win MVP? It's he is leading the league right now in passing yards. He's doing really well for his team. I'm not sure if it's happened before, a rookie quarterback winning MVP. Usually it's just offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
But that's another name to kind of throw out. If he's a quarterback, and so a lot of people would just immediately throw him into the conversation because he's a quarterback. So that's another name to consider.
Yeah. Okay. In a minute and a half, NBA, who's the best team right now, and what's a certainty that we got right now?
The Timberwolves are still very surprising. So I'm not saying they're the best team, but they're the team that's at the top right there. And then over on the East, Milwaukee.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, and that Memphis is bad with or without Morant. We're going to see if that's true or not, but in a couple weeks here. Lastly,
And
college
somehow Detroit is worse.
That's true. Yes. College basketball is you've got 7 undefeated teams left. One of them is BYU, by the way, who's number 14 in the country right now. They play Utah on Saturday in Salt Lake City, so that'll be interesting. 2 good teams. So
I think like 5 or 6 of the undefeated is in the Big 12 as well.
Yeah, Big 12 is good. So next week we're going to do a college bowl preview, I believe. So get ready for that. Thanks, everyone.